My son is not yours. The woman's voice echoed through the living room. I froze. My heart raced, and my hands trembled as I stood by the door. My husband, Emeka, sat stunned, his eyes wide in disbelief. His mouth moved, but no words came out. The woman repeated herself, this time louder and more forceful. Emeka, the boy is not yours. I have told you, his real father is taking him abroad, and don't you try to stop me. Emeka woke up feeling great on a Monday morning, almost set for work that fateful day when I heard the doorbell ring. As I reached for the door, standing before me was Emeka's mistress, the mother of his child, the child his whole family used in taunting me. What happened next will change the way you view life. Sit back and listen to a story you will not forget in a while. Also comment where you are listening from, and if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to my channel for more life lesson stories. The room fell silent. Emeka looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. This was the child he had paraded around for years as his own, the child that he and his entire family used to mock and taunt me. And now, this woman was telling him the boy was never his. I swallowed hard, the pain of all those years washing over me in waves. But a small, quiet voice inside me whispered, maybe now, things will change. The story of my experience as a wife began some years ago. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, wedding bells were ringing, and I was so excited getting married to Emeka. Our wedding day was beautiful. Family, friends, and neighbors all gathered, dressed in colorful attires and headgears, smiling and dancing. People came with gifts and congratulatory messages. I felt so happy and blessed to be starting a new life with Emeka, the man I loved. After the wedding, we went on our honeymoon. 2 days later, Emeka and I sat down to open the many gifts we received. We laughed and talked as we unwrapped each one, carefully noting down the names of those who gave us each present. Then, we found a strange card without a name. It was not like the other cards. It was a missing your card, filled with romantic words. My heart tightened. Who could have sent such a card to my husband? With a bit of questioning, Emeka confessed that it was from his ex-girlfriend. He said he almost married her but broke up because her mother always interfered in their relationship. His explanation left me feeling uneasy. The words in the card were full of sadness, and it seemed like the person who wrote it was still in pain. I decided to let it go because Emeka said it was all in the past, and I was the one married to him now. We started our life together, hoping to build a happy home. But as weeks turned into months, and months into years, we faced a problem. I was not getting pregnant. People started asking questions, and Emeka and I became worried. After 3 years with no child, Emeka began to say strange things. He said maybe someone somewhere did not want us to have a baby, or maybe we were cursed. We went to the hospital many times. The doctors checked both of us and said we were perfectly fine. There was no reason why we couldn't have children. But still, there was no baby. I tried to stay positive, but I could see Emeka changing. He looked sadder every day. His mother also began to treat me differently. She stopped calling me my dear and started giving me strange looks. 7 years passed without a child. Then, another card arrived. It looked just like the first one, but this time, the message was different. It was not romantic, it was mocking. The words were filled with sarcasm, like someone was laughing at us. When I showed Emeka the card, he shrugged it off, saying it must have been sent to the wrong address. But deep down, I knew something was not right. Why would someone send such a card to us? Emeka grew more distant. He began spending more time outside and less time with me. 11 years into our marriage, I discovered the painful truth. Emeka had cheated on me, hoping to get another woman pregnant. When I confronted him, he told me he now had a son with her. I was shattered. All those years of suffering and praying, and he went behind my back to have a child with someone else. He brought the child home one day, a chubby little boy with a bright smile. Emeka was so proud, and his family treated the child like a prince. They threw a big birthday party for him when he turned 1. I was invited, but I was treated like a stranger. Emeka and his family showered the child with gifts, enrolled him in an expensive school, and praised him in front of everyone. His mother even called him the blessing that ended the family's shame. I felt invisible, like I didn't exist. During the party, Emeka's sister, Ife, pulled me aside. "Ndidi," she said, looking me straight in the eyes, "no man should be made to suffer like Emeka has suffered because of a barren woman. You should find the root cause of your problem and let my brother be happy." I could hardly breathe. The words stung like 1,000 bees. I forced myself to smile, even though every part of me was hurting. After that, things got worse. Emeka stopped coming home some nights. He began to spend more time with the child's mother, and I was left alone in our big, empty house. His family's taunts turned into open insults. They made jokes about how I was just a guest in the family, how I should thank the other woman for ending my shame. But I held on. My own family begged me to leave the marriage, to walk away from the pain. But I couldn't. Something inside me told me that this was not the end. I kept praying, hoping that one day, things would change. The December holidays came, and Emeka did something I never expected. He invited the child's mother to our home to spend Christmas with us. She came with the child, acting like she belonged there. I tried to talk to Emeka, to ask him why he brought her into our home, but he didn't listen. He said only a mother knows how to care for her child. I felt so helpless. That Christmas was the longest I had ever experienced. Emeka and the woman went out together, leaving me behind. They came back late every night, laughing and whispering to each other. I watched from the window as they walked in, Emeka carrying the boy on his shoulders, smiling like I had never seen him smile with me. He began sleeping in the guest room with her, leaving me alone in our bed. I cried every night, praying to God to give me strength. I couldn't help but think back to the cards. Could they be the reason for all our problems? Was someone really trying to destroy our marriage? Then, one Sunday afternoon, everything became obvious. Emeka and I returned from church to find 2 women waiting outside our gate. One was his ex-girlfriend, and the other was her mother. I stood by the door, watching as they refused to come inside. They wanted to speak to Emeka alone. I couldn't help but listen as the older woman began to talk. "Emeka, we came here to undo what we did years ago," she said in a serious voice. My heart began to pound. Undo what? What did she mean? The woman continued, "Years ago, you denied my daughter's pregnancy. She had to abort, and she lost her womb because of it. We cursed you, Emeka. We made sure you would never have a child until you sought forgiveness." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. I peered through the door, watching Emeka's face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He stammered, trying to deny it. "But I have a son now," he said, his voice shaking. "The curse didn't work or whatever you think you did. Emeka. He was never yours. Why don't you check it out?" Emeka's eye widened. "What are you talking about? He is my son." The women didn't say another word. They turned and walked away, leaving Emeka standing there, stunned. He looked like a man who had lost everything. After they left, Emeka didn't speak to me for days. He stayed in his room, refusing to eat or talk. I didn't know what to do. Then, a few weeks later, the child's mother dropped another bombshell. She woke us up early one morning and announced that the boy's real father wanted to take him abroad. Emeka was devastated. He begged her not to go, but she was firm. "He is not your son, Emeka," she said coldly. "His father is taking him away." Emeka broke down. All the pride and joy he had in that child crumbled. After much argument, the boy and his mother left, and suddenly, Emeka's world fell apart. I thought he would come back to me, apologize, and try to make things right. But he didn't. He became even more distant, blaming me for everything. He kept saying that if I had given him a child earlier, none of this would have happened. His family, too, turned against me completely. His mother stopped speaking to me, and his sister refused to let me visit their home. But then, something amazing happened. The miracle I had prayed for all these years. One morning, I felt sick. I went to the hospital, and the doctor told me I was pregnant. I couldn't believe it. After all these years, after all the pain, humiliation and suffering, I was going to have a baby. I was going to be a mother. When I told Emeka, he stared at me like I was a stranger. He didn't believe me at first. But as my belly grew, he began to change. Slowly, he started coming back to me, showing some degree of care, asking how I was feeling, offering to help around the house. By the time I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy, Emeka was almost like the man I first married. He stayed by my side in the hospital, holding my hand and staring at our son with a mix of awe and disbelief. I couldn't tell if he was happy, confused, or both. His eyes were filled with so many emotions that it made my heart ache. But I didn't let myself get carried away. I couldn't forget how he had treated me for the past years, how he had turned his back on me when I needed him the most. And though his family pretended to welcome the baby, I knew they were still doubtful. There was still that bitterness in the way his mother looked at me, that skepticism in Ife's eyes. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't forgiven. Our son, Chinedu, became the center of my world. I named him Chinedu because I believed God had guided me through all the pain. I spent my days caring for him, singing to him, and watching his tiny fingers curl around mine. But even as I rejoiced in his presence, I noticed something strange happening. Emeka's mood started to change again. He was restless, pacing around the house, staring at Chinedu like he was looking for something. Then one evening, as I was rocking Chinedu to sleep, Emeka blurted out, "We need to do a DNA test." I froze, my heart dropping. "What?" I whispered, clutching Chinedu tighter. He didn't look at me. "You heard me. I want to be sure that he is really mine." His words cut me deeper than a knife. After everything we had been through, after all the insults and the abandonment, now he was questioning my faithfulness. Anger bubbled up inside me, but I swallowed it down. I looked at Chinedu's innocent face and forced myself to speak calmly. "Fine," I said. "If that's what you want, we'll do the test." The next day, Emeka took us to the hospital. I held Chinedu close as they took a tiny sample from him, and then we waited. The days stretched out like years in my mind. Emeka barely spoke to me, his eyes constantly darting to Chinedu, searching for something, anything, that would confirm his doubts or ease his fears. Finally, the results came back. I'll never forget the look on his face when he opened the envelope. His hands trembled, and his eyes widened as he read the paper over and over again. "He's mine," he whispered, his voice filled with something like wonder. I expected him to apologize, to say he was sorry for doubting me, but he didn't. Instead, he just nodded to himself and walked out of the room. It was like a switch had been flipped. He became obsessed with Chinedu, watching his every move, analyzing every smile and laugh. At first, I thought he was just being an overprotective father, but then I realized he was afraid. One night, I overheard him talking to his mother on the phone. "What if this child isn't really well and the doctor is only calming my fears?" he whispered, his voice thick with fear. "What if it's just like before, and something takes him away too?" I felt my blood turn cold. Emeka was haunted by the loss of the other child. Even though that boy had never been his, he had poured all his love and hope into him. And now, he was terrified that Chinedu would disappear out of his life too, that this happiness was just an illusion. I tried to reassure him, to show him that Chinedu was our miracle, our blessing. But Emeka's fear only grew. He started insisting that we keep Chinedu away from his family, especially his mother and Ife. He became suspicious of everyone, thinking they would try to take Chinedu from him, just like the other boy's mother had done. Then, one rainy afternoon, it happened. I was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, when I heard the front door slammed open. I rushed to the living room, my heart pounding. Emeka was standing there, a bit wet as a result of the rain, his face twisted with rage. Behind him was his mother, her eyes blazing with anger. "You lied to me, Ndidi," she screamed, pointing a finger at me. "You tricked my son with that child." I stumbled back, clutching Chinedu. "What are you talking about?" Emeka stepped forward, his face pale. "She found something," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Something that proves Chinedu isn't normal." I stared at him, confusion and fear swirling inside me. "What do you mean?" His mother threw a crumpled piece of paper at me. "This," she spat. "This is what you've been hiding. We are 100% normal in this family and an abnormal child could not be our child. Maybe you bought a baby, like some kind of miracle baby they talk about nowadays, but definitely an abnormal baby is not from our root." I picked up the paper with shaking hands. It was a letter from the hospital, one I had never seen before. Maybe the letter came while I was not in the house. The words swam before my eyes, but one sentence jumped out at me: "Genetic anomaly detected. Further testing required." "What is this?" I whispered, looking up at Emeka. "I don't know," he shouted, his eyes filled with anger. "My mother says it means Chinedu isn't really our child. That he's some kind of trick to get you remaining in my house." He shouted at me. My head spun. "That's ridiculous," I cried. "Chinedu is our son. There's nothing wrong with him." But Emeka's mother just laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You think you can fool us again, just like that other woman? You think we'll let you use this child to destroy our family?" I felt tears in my eyes. "I would never do that," I shouted. "I love Chinedu. He's mine." Emeka's face twisted with pain. "Then why didn't you tell me about this letter?" "Because I didn't know," I sobbed. "I've never seen this before." He looked at me, his eyes filled with doubt. "I want another test," he whispered. "I want to know exactly what's wrong with him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he was still doubting me, still questioning Chinedu. But I nodded, my heart breaking. "Fine," I whispered. "We'll do whatever test you want." The next few days were a blur of hospitals and doctors. They poked and prodded Chinedu, running test after test. I stayed by his side the whole time, my heart aching every time he cried. Emeka hovered in the background, his face a mask of worry and fear. Finally, the results came in. The doctor looked serious as he handed us the report. "There is nothing wrong with your child," he said slowly. "The anomaly we detected was a minor genetic variation. It's completely harmless." I felt a rush of relief. "See," I whispered, looking at Emeka. "He's fine." He's just special. Emeka stared at the paper, his face pale. But what about the curse? He whispered to himself. What if it comes back? I reached out and took his hand. There is no curse, I said firmly. Chinedu is our son. He is a blessing, not a curse. For the first time in months, Emeka's eyes softened. He looked down at Chinedu, who was sleeping peacefully in my arms. Slowly, he reached out and touched his tiny hand. He's ours, he whispered, a small smile tugging at his lips. He's really ours. The tension that had been hanging over us like a dark cloud finally began to lift. Emeka's mother left in a huff, muttering about trickery and lies, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, our nightmare was finally over. The curse had been lifted. The barren woman had become a mother. And as she cradled her son, Ndidi knew, some battles are not fought with fist or anger, but with patience and a heart full of faith. As the weeks passed, Emeka began to change. He became more attentive, more loving. He started spending more time with Chinedu, playing with him, holding him, and smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The fear that had gripped him slowly faded, replaced by a quiet joy. One evening, as we sat together watching Chinedu play, Emeka turned to me. I'm sorry, Ndidi, he whispered. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. For doubting you, for hurting you. I was so scared. Tears filled my eyes. It's okay, I whispered, reaching out to hold his hand. We have Chinedu now. That's all that matters. He nodded, his eyes softening. Yes, he murmured. We have Chinedu. And we have each other. We sat there in silence, watching our son giggle and clap his hands. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. After all the pain, the doubts, and the heartbreak, we had finally found our way back to each other. And this time, I knew we would never let go. Thank you for listening to my story. If you love this story or this story touches your heart in anywhere, please make a positive change in someone's life by commenting in the comment section or sharing it to help others keep hope alive. You can also tap on the subscribe button so YouTube algorithm can recommend it to others. Remember to also tap on the notification bell so you will be notified when I post another interesting story. I appreciate you all, and see you in my next story.